Hi all, and welcome to the Surface Design Project lecture for Art 120 illustration. In the previous exercises that we've been working on, it's had us working on a lot of sort of unrelated smaller pieces, weekly exercises, but now we're going to start focusing on maintaining a similar level of production towards a single product. So in this case, that's going to be a repeating pattern that we are going to use for a surface design on two different objects. So you'll create original imagery, arrange and color it to produce a repeating unit, and then apply that unit to create believable mockups as well. So patterns are innate parts of art that attract and mesmerize the viewer. And the ability to recognize patterns in a baseline is a baseline skill of humans, and identifying patterns in paintings is a practice that tends to have a soothing psychological effect on the viewer. Pattern recognition is a fundamental function of the human brain. In fact, all animals have it and can apply to visual images, but also sound and smell. So it allows us to take in and quickly understand our environments. Pattern recognition is what allows us to do everything from recognizing individuals and their emotional states to something like solving a jigsaw puzzle, even sensing a sort of storm that might be due as well. So as a result, patterns in art satisfy and intrigue us, whether those patterns are clearly identifiable, such as Andy Warhol's repeated images of Marilyn Monroe, or must be parsed out, as in Jackson Pollock's seemingly random splatters that create their own sort of organic pattern that we can see here on the right as well. So surface design is a little different in that it is any type of artwork, whether it's a pattern, illustration, hand lettering, etc., made by a designer that is intended to be applied to a surface to enhance its visual appearance and or functionality. And we can really find surface design everywhere you look. Someone had to design the pattern or create the color on your sheets, blankets, towels, curtains, coats, sweaters, socks, shirts, everything that you wear. Your favorite quilt was designed and stitched by hand or machine. Someone had to spin the yarn, dye, knit, or crochet your sweater, as well as things all around us, such as our cell phone cases or some sort of packaging that we might be interacting with as well. So whether it's done by hand or by machine, someone had to design the surface design pattern for that particular object. And patterns have been used since some of the first art was created, even in ancient times. I'm sure you guys have all seen some sort of elements of the past that are adorned with unique patterns that tie into maybe the social context that was going on during that time, as well as things within their environment that they were trying to express visually. So we can see it in a pride of lions here on the walls in this 20,000-year-old Lascaux caves, which is some of the first artwork ever found. And also on these cord markings on the first pottery made 10,000 years ago as well. Patterns have regularly adorned architecture throughout the ages, as well as many other parts of history that we are well aware of. So surface design includes both functional and non-functional items. Non-functional items such as sculptural baskets, wall quilts, embroidered, dyed, woven, stitched wall art such as fiber installations. Really, the list is endless. Typically, though, surface designs are going to be used for fabrics, cards, and wrapping paper, and gift products, but they can also apply to subtle elements of design such as packaging, brand identity, and more. Here we can see a world of surface design, an artistic representation of the industry, and we can see that the majority of these designs are going to be used on things like fabric, cards and wrapping paper, the gifts products, wall art, home decor, and then as you get it more into book covers, editorial, packaging, so on and so forth. In art, pattern can come in many forms. An artist may use color to signify a pattern, repeating a single or select palette of colors throughout a work. They can also use lines to form patterns, such as in op art, which we see here an example of from the 1960s. These patterns can also be shapes, whether geometric, as in mosaics and tessellations, or something more natural, such as floral patterns, like we see in sunflowers or other sort of organic elements in nature. And all of these are going to be different patterns that we can find in artwork and as well as the world around us. So when working with a seamless pattern, you want to avoid showing the edges or the sort of separation from what you originally created from your pattern and how it's expanding or tessellating to create a pattern that goes over an entire surface. So you want to avoid those edges and you want to have your artwork really go in between these different shapes and enter into the original pattern that may be sitting next to it here. So this is a really good example of this. So what's going off of the top of the edge here at the very top of this image is actually going to be entering from the bottom as well. And we can also look over here at the right or the left. What's going off on the left side is going to be coming in from the right side. So we might leave those spaces sort of blank in part of our pattern so that when we start to tessellate this, it's going to fill in those blank voids, and it's going to be much harder to detect where this initial pattern is starting and stopping from. So by having these portions of the design bleed into the next portion of the pattern, this can help to create a more seamless pattern that, again, is much harder to identify what that initial pattern started from. So to create some context here, artists and surface designers really hold a lot of power. They're in control of product surfaces that customers expect a lot from. And that expectation comes with a responsibility within the design process as well. You want to think about what that sort of product is, what the context of that product is going to be sitting in, how the user is going to be interacting with that product. All of these things are parts of the design process that you're going to want to consider before you even get into your actual design of your surface pattern. Many artists use patterns in their work to convey a mood or also as a decorative motif. Here we can see an example by Shepard Fairey, who often uses these sort of decorative motifs and creates very organic patterns, also somewhat geometric patterns, and sort of juxtaposes those and contrasts them against one another. And he sort of, if you're familiar with his work, layers a lot of that artwork together. And over here on the right, we can see Yayoi Kusama, who is a artist who adorns large sculptural pieces with many of these patterns that she creates and surface designs that she fills entire installations with as well, sort of bringing you into her own world or fantasy world where everything is covered in these very decorative sort of surface patterns from the areas that you sit on, that you walk on, to the entire installation of the piece. So when dealing with a product, we often think of the surface pattern and how we can benefit that product. So the better, funnier, or more thoughtful you are on the product level, the more attractive your design is going to be to a customer. So here's some good questions to answer before you start designing. What theme will I explore for these designs? Where do these objects get used? In what context are the objects being used? How big is the product going to be? Is it for a home, office, or outdoors? What mood am I trying to convey with this product? And is it something that people are going to brag about or find unique within the context of this product? So what's really important is focusing on a theme. This is going to be the most successful way to approach this project and yield the best results, essentially. So for the surface design introduction here, and in this assignment, we're going to be creating two related but unique surface patterns that will be applied to different objects within a related set. So you're going to start by selecting a theme or a topic and thoroughly researching it. So you're going to select a theme or a topic that you are passionate about and focus on imagery, colors, patterns, and objects that are related to it. You're then going to collect these images and curate them on a mood board that can be a standard letter size sheet with the title of your theme or topic as well. So once you have done your research, you're going to use your mood board to create these thumbnail sketches moving forward. So this is an example of sort of mood board here. You can see that there's a collection of images all related towards bees, and they've called out some imagery that has the distinct representation of what it is with the bee in the left-hand corner, as well as this honeycomb pattern, which is found in nature, which we're all very aware of in its relation to bees, as well as just some textures and some typefaces and color palettes that are all working together to create a certain mood and a certain intention behind where the theme of this project is going. So from looking at this mood board, you automatically start to understand where this person is going to steer their design, and utilizing some of the references that they have here will help within the sketches phase, as well as the final pieces themselves. So once you've created this mood board on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, you can go larger if you'd like. There's no minimum amount of images that I want you guys to use, but I want you to have enough that you can get a sense of what the mood and the theme is that you're going for. I also want you to think about what colors you're using within this and start to put some of those within the mood board as well. And really curate this. I'd like you to spend a little bit of time positioning all of these images in some sort of curated fashion within the format of that page. So once you've done sufficient research there, we can start getting into the sketching. And I want you guys to work on different thumbnail sketches that are going to become your patterns. So it could be something of that's more focused on illustration, or it could be something that's more focused on mark making, or possibly a combination of the two. And once you have sufficient thumbnail sketches, then we are going to get feedback from the class in which direction we should move forward. And I want you to select 2 of the final thumbnail sketches to then translate them into the computer using Illustrator or Photoshop, or a combination of the two, to create our surface design pattern that we can then put on our mockups. So these are some examples here of some past patterns that have been created. And you can tell that they are following the mood or the theme to that initial mood board there. And on the left here, we can tell that the surface pattern has a lot of different elements in it. It has some illustration pieces, as well as some geometric pieces, as well as some sort of random mark making, and all of these are working together. You'll also notice that the pattern is sort of spilling off of the edges, so that when it is put together, it can start to tessellate that actual pattern into a much larger pattern. So once we create this smaller square, it can essentially cover as large of a surface as we need it to with that repeated pattern that has those seamless edges. So in contrast to that, the additional pattern that they've created is a little bit more simple, with just some mark making textures on there to sort of accompany that look and feel. So you'll also need to consider the objects and how it will be applied, and you're going to need to find a template that will be suitable for your needs. There are dozens of sites online that you guys can download free high-resolution mockups from, but keep in mind that many of these will be standard objects, so if you are going for something that is more unique, you may need to create your own mockup using Photoshop. So this is an example of that pattern that we just saw and how it could be used in a sort of mock-up here and on a larger scale. So we can see that the patterns themselves are related to one another by having similar colors and similar mark-making styles, and they have this sort of harmonious relationship between the two. And also the items that these surface designs are put onto are also related to one another. We have this sort of stationary set, which is being adorned with all these different surface designs that this individual has created. And it obviously feels like a cohesive and curated set. So you wouldn't want to necessarily do a notebook and a pair of shoes as they're somewhat unrelated to one another. You want to kind of think about how these patterns are going to work in a set. So that's where these themes are going to be very important. Here we can see another example of some sketches which were then used to create the final surface patterns. And again, they have this combination of a sort of illustrative pattern as well as something that's a little bit more organic and um, non-subjective as far as what it is, with just these mark making sort of patterns that we see. And here they've used two of those on the left for the outside and inside of this wrapping paper, and then this additional sort of cell phone case over here on the right. Now, as beautiful as these are, I do think that these two items are somewhat unrelated. So I would encourage you guys to, again, think about what items you could choose that might fit the set a little bit better. So, for example, if they were going to use the wrapping paper, they might want to use some sort of stationary set to accompany that, or if they were going to be using the cell phone cover, possibly it could be some sort of laptop case cover or something that might accompany some other sort of electronic item as well. So I want you guys to think about these items within a set. Again, this is a high resolution mockup that these two patterns were created for. So we can see we have this pattern on the outside, which has more of the illustrative caricatures on there, and then this pattern on the inside, which was also used for the hang tag, which is a little bit more subtle in its caricature nature, but still feels like it's related to one another, and we can sense that this is all working together really nicely in this unified set here as well. So notice that these mockups are really high resolution. And again, these were all downloaded and um, brought into Photoshop and then applied through the Photoshop program. But if it's something that is maybe a little less common or a little more unique, then you might need to take a photo yourself or find some sort of object that you are trying to apply the surface pattern to and use Photoshop to mock this up on your own. It all depends on what it is that you're using for those items. So for the final deliverables on this project, you're going to have a digital mood board that's indicating the direction in which you're headed on 8.5 by 11. You're also going to have your thumbnail sketches, which can either be digital or analog of your patterns. By digital or analog, I mean that you could use your Wacom tablet or the programs such as Photoshop or Illustrator to start with these if you would like, or you can use pencil on paper to begin the thumbnail sketches for these as well. I really encourage you guys to use pencil on paper for this, but I know for this particular project, there's a lot of mark making that can be made in the digital realm, so it may be worthwhile to use a combination of the two to start these thumbnail sketches as well. But ultimately, it's up to you whether you want to go digital or go analog. And then for number 3, you're going to have your 2 digital swatches showing the unit of your pattern. So this is going to be on a minimum 5" by 5" square at 300 pixels per inch. That's going to show the pattern that would then be tessellated onto further squares to then cover a larger surface. And then finally, you're going to have your high resolution mock-up image of each pattern overlaid on products that make sense for your intended audience. So again, if it's something that you need to create your own mockup for, you can do so. Otherwise, you can download a high resolution mockup and use those to overlay the surface design that you make for that particular piece. So as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and email me. And I look forward to seeing your guys' work soon.